we are due a musical revolution in Great Britain. And it was Tony Wilson who famously said there is a music revolution in Britain every 13 years. Now, he got that from 1955 was the arrival of Elvis Presley. 1963 was Beatlemania. 1976 was punk rock, Sex Pistols. 1989 was acid house, Manchester, which led to the arrival of Britpop. And probably 2002, 2003, you might say, was a drum and bass revival. Well, now, the music revolution, it's been long awaited, but we just know that it's going to be AI. And the impact of that is going to be absolutely huge and fundamental for music, art and culture. It's making waves already. But the question is, why has music not undergone a revolution as such in terms of the type of music, not the way it's produced? AI will have a role, I'm sure, and that's good or bad. I personally don't like it. I think that human beings should be at the soul of human creativity. But the reality is AI is here. But I think that streaming platforms that have arrived over the last 20 years have prevented music revolution. And that's the reason that people have full and complete access to the entire archive of musical history at their fingertips on their phone. So when somebody has so much choice, there's almost a paradox of choice and a paradox of influence, because there can be so much influence on somebody, it ends up influencing nobody. So streaming platforms have, in my view, stunted music revolution for up and coming and new artists trying to define new types and genres of music for us to get into in Great Britain. So the arrival of globalism in terms of the internet and what that has brought to music culture means that somebody sitting in Birmingham now doesn't just have to see the twang, or sitting in Coventry and see the Specials as an influence. They can just as easily, and probably more easily, because it's forced on them, see some rap band in LA as an influence, or a Bollywood artist in India, or some rock band in Australia as an influence. So that's happened to a degree anyway. You know, our influence of Elvis Presley back in 1955 has obviously had an impact on rock and roll culture here in the UK. And if you think about things like grunge, that was hugely influential here in the UK back in the late 80s, early 90s, that is obviously imported from a different type of culture, imported here, and we took to it. And obviously a lot of people love Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins, Pearl Jam, etc., etc. Temple of the Dog is one I always forget. I think it's Temple of the Dog, innit? I'm sure that's the name of the band. Pretty good grunge stuff. Anyway, so the 13-year revolution is well upon us, and AI is the revolution, I'm afraid. So there's nothing you or I can do about that. Artists are using AI anyway, established artists, but up-and-coming ones are using it all the time. You know, kids on the bus to school are making records now in their school uniform on the top of a bus, thanks to the wonder of AI. So the question is, where does that leave us? Well, of course, it leaves us looking to the past again, doesn't it? And this is why when we look at our stuff from the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, we know it was a golden era. It just looks even more gold every day that goes on, doesn't it? So when we look at stuff like the Brit Awards now, we look at it and go, doesn't mean anything to me anymore. You know, it just doesn't mean anything. And a lot of people said that to me. You know, the Brit Awards was a thing. It's been and gone. It doesn't mean what it meant to mean. If that's supposed to be the best of British music, which is basically corporatised, the record companies all voting for their own acts, and so on and so forth. It really is not any sign of a meaningful British music culture anymore. So the question is, where is this coming from? So AI is a tool, but what is the genre of music that's coming through? What is the style? What is the dress code? Where is it being played? I guarantee you it's not being played live anywhere, because there are no live venues of note anyway. The only sort of gigs that you will see promoted now are £150 tickets to go and watch James play their 50th tour in a sellout arena, because that is where our generation are spending their money. They're spending their money on retro stuff with artists that are already millionaires, and we're paying to see mainly the old stuff played back to us. But yeah, there is an interest, I suppose, in some of the new stuff. But you and I know nobody goes to see an artist from back in the day to see the old stuff. If you went to see Oasis and they played 20 new songs, yeah, you wouldn't be impressed. You want to hear Cigarettes and Alcohol. You want to hear Live Forever and Supersonic. You do not want to hear a new song that Noel Gallagher has written in 2026. It's totally meaningless for us to see or hear that sort of stuff, innit? So I don't know where it's from, because I'm keeping an eye out, and the only sort of music that seems reasonable to me is the same sort of genres that were around back in the day for us lot. There isn't any new genres that I'm hearing. Drill is probably something that's already out of date now. You know, it's probably 15 years old, drill music, and that hasn't ever gone mainstream. So I don't know what it is. You know, drill, grime, all this sort of stuff is urban music that hasn't ever really cut through. And it says it all when young people, like my own kids, are listening to the same sort of stuff that we listen to. Not because we're forcing it on them, but just because it just sounds more tuneful, more authentic, more soulful, and it means something to them. It means something. For me, I've always said Britpop is the last type of music culture that actually meant something to us. You know, that was probably the last sort of music culture, because acid house and dance was already in. You know, Ibiza was already rocking in 1988. The Hacienda's roof was being blown off in 1988. So that, to me, dance and rave predates, obviously, the Britpop era. And as I've said numerous times, and I'm sick of saying, when I heard Travis and Why Does It Always Rain on Me repeated on the radio that time when it came out, was the moment to me when I knew that Britpop had gone out of the water. It just sounded drony, corporate, boring, more middle class than even Britpop, I would say. It just sounded really as if they were intentionally trying to get rid of the likes of Blur, Oasis, Elastica, Echo Belly, and stuff like that with Travis. And that led to Coldplay. And they became indistinguishable for me for some reason at around that time. And I know you don't like Coldplay. So that was the moment when that kind of independent, artistic, cultural, working middle class scene disappeared. It became stadium rock, corporate friendly stadium rock, and that was just never what any of us are into, is it? You're not into it, and I'm not into it. We will go and see perhaps a band in a stadium, but the only reason for that is because there aren't any venues big enough to hold them, and nobody's playing small gigs anymore. You know, even these famous artists won't even think about supporting a local up-and-coming band and giving them a leg up. that was one of the things that really disappointed me about the Oasis tour, was they gave the support slot to Richard Ashcroft. Why didn't they just pick 3 or 4 bands from each city they were playing in and just give them a platform? You know, that's what should have happened. Instead, it's a milieu of corporatism that means the same old faces get the support slots. So we're never seeing anybody new. James are playing. I love James, but the Doves are supporting them. Now, I love James and the Doves, but why are the Doves supporting James? Why aren't James just going, you know what, we'll give these 3 up-and-coming skint acts a little bit of wedge to play in front of this audience? What an opportunity for somebody. But instead they give it to somebody who has already done world tours, is already a multimillionaire. That side of the music industry just doesn't make sense to me. This is probably another reason why there aren't any musical genres or musical scenes coming through anymore, because the big boys are blocking them. Not just the record companies, who won't have any small acts at the Brit Awards, but the big bands themselves and their management and stuff, ring fencing it all and isolating it all, so that people who have got a band, who are trying to make it, can't even get a gig in their local pub. Never mind in a music venue. It's notoriously difficult to exist financially in a band in 2026. The reality is everybody's got bills, and just because you're an artist, it doesn't mean you don't have to pay your rent or your mortgage or your your council tax and stuff like this. Back in the day, it was probably more sustainable to be on the dole and be in a band. Those days are gone. You can't even rent a rehearsal room for the price of a week. You can't even use a rehearsal room, I'd probably say, for 2 hours and cover it with your dole money. It just won't happen. So it is a doom spiral, but I am hopeful, and I know AI is not the answer, but I'm hopeful that something will come along and stimulate it so that we can all get interested in new stuff as well as loving the old stuff that we all know and love. So that's my 10 pence worth on the 13-year musical revolution trend. Does it ever happen anymore? I don't think it does, but I'd be interested to hear what you think.